This is my 2013 Rocket Bunny FRS that I've had for almost a decade. It started out as a daily driver, then quickly met its demise as a drift car in the following years. It's been through everything, from drifting the streets of Orlando to being accidentally launched up a concrete K-rail. It's truly my baby. And for the last several years since installing the wide body, it has not been driven much due to some issues with the turbo. And in an effort to return the car to its once former glory, I'm going to take you back to August of last year when we found out what the culprit was. So the other week, my roommate Pedro brought over his expensive vacuum and boost leak tester so we could hook it up to the FRS to see why we were under boosting. Running wastegate, we would see roughly 6 to 7 PSI, and running on my 14 PSI map, we would only see about 10 to 11. Unfortunately, we weren't able to identify any sources of boost leaks with the smoke tester, which has now caused me to go ahead and rip the turbo out and take it apart to see what is going on. And sure enough, when I took the exhaust housing off the turbo, I saw that there was lots of damage to the turbine. But if there's any reason why we were under boosting, then maybe we can attribute it to that. The compressor side looks completely fine. Before I removed it, I tightened up the wastegate rod pretty tight to see if we could at least overboost, and sure enough we did. Nonetheless, this issue will probably not allow us to boost at lower RPMs as efficiently as we could if the blades were fine. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, that's good because more boost in lower RPMs is just more stress on the rods. But I just hate thinking that we're not tapping into the full power potential of the car with that damage. I don't want to say I'm stupidly gonna run it the way it is, but I just want to be able to drive it. So let's go ahead and piece this thing back together, get it in the car again. In an act of stupidity, I told myself, you know what? I just want to be able to drive the car. So what if it doesn't boost till 5 grand? And then after I did some research and figured out that all that missing amounts of material from the turbine blade would cause the turbo to effectively be imbalanced, I went ahead and removed my reinstalled turbo. We are experiencing a little issue with a nut getting rounded off on the downpipe flange. But now that I own a welder, there ain't nothing that I can't fix. But let's go ahead and give a good old rip to our Zangong wrench, since we will be welding this sucker to that nut to remove it. Rest in peace, homie. You will be missed. Man, I love having a welder. All right, so I split the turbo. Look at how much material is missing from each blade. This would definitely not hold up over time, especially with how I plan on beating the crap out of the car. So I had posted on the SBD forum on Facebook asking if this is an issue that might be attributed to excess heat. And sure enough, the owner of SBD had indicated that yes, I must have been running very lean, creating too much heat and subsequently burning up the turbine blade. I've always struggled with this car leaning out a bit from like 3,000 to 5,000 RPM. On wide open throttle, it would spike to about 15 and then immediately come back down to 13-ish AFR, which still in the grand scheme of things, running E85 is a little bit higher than what the target AFR should have been. So shame on me for running the car lean. I don't have an AFR gauge outside of the one that reads the factory O2. I just so happen to have a spare AFR gauge that we will install. So now what? If I were to get this thing rebuilt, who knows how long the car will be down. But luckily, I held on to an old SBD turbo from years past when we upgraded to the 500X turbo. Lo and behold, the 400X that I've already split apart because there's some little things that I need to do to it, which I've held on to. I almost sold it a couple months ago and thank God I didn't. The different names of the turbos kind of connotate to the overall power that they can make on E85. Granted, I wasn't making anywhere near 500 wheel on the car. If I did have a built engine and cranked it up to 16 to 20-ish PSI, you would get close to that 500 horsepower mark. But since we are stock block, there's no problem making 400-ish wheel. I think actually it's like 380-ish at 14 PSI on the 400X. And then since our blades are in good shape, we should gain a little bit more low end, which will be perfect for drifting. What I need to figure out though, the oil feed is a different size. This turbo is only oil cooled. The 500X is oil and coolant cooled. It's a dual ball bearing design. So you see how much it wants to spin there. This is just journal bearing, I believe, but it will get the job done. Just need to get the oil restrictor, a couple bolts for the oil drain, and then it will be a matter of getting the turbo back on the car and then making sure that we monitor our AFRs. For my research, I don't necessarily need to get a retune, although if I do pinpoint the issue with why we were leaning out, which I'm thinking it might be some suspect injectors. I have the Injector Dynamics 1050X injectors that I've been running for 3 to 4 years now, and they have seen E85, so maybe they are gunked up. So it might be worth our time to get those cleaned. But either way, we got our work cut out for us. And I'm definitely tempted to just yank this stupid FA20 out and put our nice little LS3 from the 240 in it and call it a day. All right, so it's the next day. I was able to get the downpipe and the exhaust housing mounted onto the car. Had to make some changes since we're now running effectively a little bit of smaller of a turbo. I had 2 coolant lines coming out from the intake manifold that I had to remove and put back in the factory crossover loop. I transferred over my turbo drain and I removed the 10 PSI wastegate from the 500X turbo that will install in replacement of the 7 PSI wastegate on the 400X. As much as I wish I could use my old exhaust housing that has a much wider opening for the wastegate flap, I'm unable to do so because this is a 6-bolt design versus a V-band clamp, which ultimately makes install a lot easier. Lets us clock the turbo the way we need since there's a clearance issue between the up pipe and the turbo drain. It gets pretty close to the crank pulley. So honestly, we're on the home stretch here. Gotta be careful not to damage the blades as we piece the turbo back together. All right, so we got everything back in the car. Charge piping, wastegate lines, the wastegate itself. Unfortunately, I could not find the right fitting for the oil feed. So I have that on order and it should get here tomorrow. And here we are, present day, with the FRS running and driving, but with a little twist. You'll see that we have installed another 500X turbo. That 400X that I had would have sufficed, but I managed to find one of these turbos secondhand on Facebook. Had the dude ship it to me from, I think, Texas. We installed that, and yeah, we're at this point. And in the grand scheme of things, this is what I should have done from the get-go, instead of having to install and remove the turbo multiple times unneededly. I only have 39,000 miles on this engine. Granted, they're probably 39,000 hard-driven miles, but it'd be nice if we could just get this thing to last us another year or two before we eventually end up swapping something into it. With the current power that it makes, not the perfect daily, because a caged drift car is never gonna make a perfect daily, but it should be fun and reliable enough to get me to work and back and to at least enjoy driving again. But that's where we currently stand with the FRS. I did end up switching tuners. More on that in a future video, as well as some more info on the drivability issues that we are now seeing with the car. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to slap a big old thumbs up on it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.